Let's go! Last month I gave you a Making a Five Nights at Freddy's sequel video, which I said at the time would be the start of a series that I would do probably every month. I'm just taking a pre-existing franchise and just seeing what potential other stories could be done with the details that already exist. Now, at the time I also specified the impetus for that was specifically that I came up with an idea for Stargate when Stargate Universe was cancelled. Well, as you can tell from the thumbnail and the title, that is still not this video. It was originally meant to be, but then I unexpectedly spent over a month focusing on coming up with some Mario games. So I'm going to pay that off as well here in this video, in this sequel to the Making a Sequel video from before. Now, I've already tried to record this once, and yeah, me actually trying to go into detail about any of the games results in it being far too long, and also me being kind of perpetually checking the time because I'm trying to make sure I fit everything in, and that I'm sure doesn't make for as conducive of a viewing experience. So I'm doing it again. So instead I'm just going to be discussing kind of the broader strokes of coming up with the ideas instead. And if you want to go over the details yourself, you can find them on my website on a specific page that will be linked in the description below. Just fair warning, it is a long document, like over half the length of my first book, Gift of the Manson, also available in the description below. Yeah, so it started off as just one idea for one game, but knowing me, I can't just let a story be a standalone most of the time, so it just had to keep on snowballing. Oh, well, we could do this kind of story as well that naturally leads on from it. Oh, we'd also like to do this kind of story. And so I've ended up with 26 games in total, plus a bonus Kirby game. So yeah, that happened. Also, before we get into it properly, I should probably just clarify, making a Mario sequel, does that just mean making another game? Unlike with Five Nights at Freddy's, which does have a specific lore that's reaching through the games and the books and beyond, with Mario, despite some consistent themes, such as Bowser kidnapping Peach, they feel potentially quite disparate to each other. Well, that's where we return to the game theorists, once again, like I directed you towards in the previous one. For MatPat has also done some videos over the years talking about some other potential hidden lore ideas within the Mario games, and it's upon those that I am building. The first of which is literally one of my favourite videos that he's done, is actually a timeline for the Mario games. Not all of them, because there are just so many games that could be connected to that universe via various characters, each having their own spin-offs and arcade games and crossovers and whatever. But for the mainline games, through Mario's life specifically, due to hints that actually do exist in the game, with just a little bit of extrapolation, you can kind of place them into something of a chronological order. Then you also have theories such that Peach is actually controlling the Toad people by means of fungal spores, the kind of spores that can also be found in certain rainforests, which, when they take over ants, they cause those ants to climb up to high points, and then the sprouts come out of the ant's body, which then release more spores and so forth. So it's kind of a zombification kind of deal. And because of that, that then drove the Goombas out of the Mushroom Kingdom, which was originally also their home, and they went to Bowser and the Koopas to ask for help. And so Bowser, since then, part of his wanting to kidnap Peach has been partly due to him wanting to stop her so that the threat doesn't come to his kingdom as well. You also have that Luigi has a darker side that he just doesn't show very often, but he has the capacity to be like a villain. The bananas in Donkey Kong's jungle have magical properties, and that the final pairings at the end of the timeline will actually be that Mario ends up with Daisy and that Luigi ends up with Peach, with Luigi and Peach's child being Rosalina. It's just due to all the wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff happening in the Galaxy games, with kind of galaxies being rebooted and timelines going back on themselves. She's ended up in the present from further ahead down their timeline, so they're already meeting their daughter without realising it. I think those are the main ones. If I remember any others, then I'll mention them as well. But those are the seeds that I am building upon here and saying, if we were going to have more games, what could we do with that story potential? Now, obviously, well, I say obviously, Nintendo probably wouldn't lean into any of these ideas specifically. The best you could get away with is to add more subtle hints and clues here and there that the theorists could pick up upon. So we're not going to have Peach being the outright villain in any case, something like that. Although that was kind of the original idea behind what my Mario game would have been many years ago. When I was playing Super Mario Galaxy 1 and Galaxy 2, which are actually the only Mario games I've personally played, although I've seen a lot of gameplay from a load of the other entries, either just generally beforehand, because they were played by other YouTubers I watch, or in doing research for this project. When I was playing the Galaxy games, I just had the idea, well, what if actually Bowser was trying to kidnap Peach because she was actually the real big bad, and you had a game where halfway through you think you've defeated Bowser, but then it's revealed that when Peach is let free, she'll unleash whatever it was that she was doing. Even if that was to happen, if Nintendo was to dare make that kind of game, and I don't think they will, because they don't tend to have their good characters be evil unless they are brainwashed or something like that, which has happened in a couple of cases. Unless they're going to happen, you're still in kind of a Severus Snape situation. Because even if Bowser was technically acting for the overall good, he still did some terrible, terrible things along the way. If you look at all the stuff that he's done as the antagonist of any of the other Mario games, or the mainline Mario games he appears in, yeah, that doesn't necessarily excuse what he was doing to try to take down Peach. So yeah, that wasn't the line I ended up going with now that I've brought this idea back in the present day. So my direction after that fact still focused on Bowser, however, so in a slightly different way. Because upon looking over a list of all the various Mario games there have been to try to get inspiration, or more rather to see what had already been done so I could be clear on what hadn't been done, I found that so many of the games were just revolved around Bowser. Like, obviously I know he is the big bad of the franchise, and you do have other like recurring villains as well, like King Boo, King K. Rool in the Donkey Kong games, etc. Like others in the Mario and Luigi RPG series, you've got recurring characters like Forful. But yeah, just so many are based around Bowser and him kidnapping Peach and whatever. I wanted to get away from that. Not to come up with a new original villain in this first idea, which again, to begin with, was meant to be the only idea. Because again, there had been other original villains as well, plenty of those as well. I wanted to begin and make something a recurring villain, a character that already existed, and bring them back. And the character I landed on kind of ended making that a compromise, wherein they are a character that already existed, but they haven't actually been a villain yet in any of the mainline series. That being Waluigi. Although, as you'll see if you read through the details of the descriptions of the game breakdowns, tweaks have to be made in the circumstances surrounding his character in order to make him kind of like the formidable villain of a given game. And as part of that first game, what did end up happening is there was a lot of exposition that would be needed. There's kind of lore throughout all of the games, at the very least just to be able to tie them together in a chronological order in some respect after the fact. But especially in that first game, compared to any of the others, there was a lot of backstory that changes or sheds new light on pre-existing characters that kind of set up that story going on there. Now, because, again, to start off with, I thought that that was the only game I was going to be coming up with, there was kind of a little bit of compulsion to try to include as much as possible, because that's me. Now, even after, though, I've now created all these other game ideas as well that also star some of those characters in separate situations, I don't want to then kind of trim that one down, because that's still so much, that story is now so much built around, you meet this character at this point, meet this character at this point, you learn this about these people at this point. So instead it will just have to be a matter of finding a way that the exposition could be integrated into the gameplay that wouldn't be distracting or slow things down. I mean, with the Kirby games, you have a lot of the exposition comes in the pause screens. When you pause the game, it will give you like details about whoever you're going up against or the place or whatever. I feel like I can't just copy that mechanic, because that would just be blatantly copying Kirby, even though they're both Nintendo. But something along those lines wherein if you wanted to get those kind of more detailed exposition bits, they would be optional and separate. And yeah, again, it's all described, ideas of how that could be achieved in the descriptions as well. But yes, throughout all of this, throughout all of these ideas will be a matter of how to balance gameplay with telling a story that's connecting all of these, even if it's not in the order of release. In kind of a similar vein, I guess, is also just a matter of balancing tone, because as a writer myself, the ideas that I come up with, a number of these games potentially have themes or moments that are darker than would necessarily be in a Nintendo Mario game. Not that Mario games haven't had dark moments before. So I've also had to try to balance that going through to make sure that I wasn't going anywhere too far, because these are still meant to be games that can be played by kids, while in some cases just keeping a few bits here and there because I felt they were particularly powerful, that they were that important to the story, so forth. And also I say at the beginning that if you were just to describe the plots of certain Mario games, they would potentially come across as more serious than actually playing the game would have you experience it. And that's because the addition of the music, the graphics, the actual levels and all that in the actual execution of the game, that's also very much important as to the overall tone. So I've kind of said, regardless of how these read here, obviously in the development stages efforts will be made to make sure that these remain kind of with the jaunty tone that would be more appropriate for most of them. So then, why did things spiral out of control? There's a few different combinations of factors. To begin with, it was just a matter of, because I'd also introduced a couple of new characters in that first game as well, I wanted to make sure that they were made full use of and explored to their greatest extent. So I kind of, okay, I'll come up with a sequel where we focus more on those kind of characters. Oh, but that story then naturally leads on to this, and those naturally lead on to this, and it's kind of, what's set up within a given story naturally lends itself to directing you towards further exploration of the world elsewhere. And that took me to a total of 6 games to begin with. And then there was also a matter of, oh, but there's other styles of game we could try. Like, I haven't done anything that makes use of the Paper Mario franchise, or Mario and Luigi, the party games, the kart games, the sports games, any of those. And what if there are game types that haven't been done for Mario at all, like tycoon games, or visual novels, VR, anything like that? And so there was all these other entries that were now like, okay, how could we do a game in that style that fits into the Mario universe? Oh, but what about these characters? Again, I haven't made, even though a number of people appeared in the first game, still not everyone, and those who did appear may have been more side characters. Let's make sure that everyone has their own like fair share of the limelight. Like, so you've got, no, Wario has had games of his own already in WarioWare and the Wario Lands games, whatever, but give him a game. Luigi now has his own trilogy, and again, also that was naturally set up at the ending of another game that he would go off on his own for a while. But as part of that, while I'm doing all these other games about other characters, you want to make sure that you still have plenty in the mix of that still are Mario, because it's the Mario franchise. And kind of in a similar note, even though for a lot of these I'm trying to stay away from Bowser as the big bad to get variety in there, you still need to have him there, because he is ultimately the main antagonist of this whole thing. So you need to make sure he still appears from time to time, and now because he's showing up less frequently, make sure that when he does show up, it's in a story that really makes it worthwhile that this is his appearance, that makes the most out of the potential of the character. As such, and as you'll see if you look at the beginning of the document, the PDF, I have proposed a kind of release schedule that Nintendo could do, purely on the notion that they would be doing 2 games a year. It's just a thing that I came up with, because just to simply do it 1 a year would then just become the list as it is. And as part of that then, so you've got 26 Mario games that it ended up being over 13 years, plus inherently some Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, either 3 or 4 of those throughout there. I can't help that, they're always going to be going on, and I can't really base anything on those because they're just the Olympics. So you got that going on as well. But in the pairs for each year, I also just wanted to make sure that you had different actual gameplay styles in the given pairings. I don't really know what goes into game development. I'm just kind of making a slight assumption that the teams that will work on the 3D open world games will be different to the people who are doing the 2D side scrollers or something like that. So because I'm having such a tight release schedule again of 2 a year for 13 years, it would help efficiency potentially to have different gameplay styles throughout each one. So I try to make sure there's also a mix of, as I say, your 3D games, your 2.5D side scrollers, the sports game, the kart games, all of that, the pixelated RPGs, all of those, just to make sure, again, it's all a variety, both for variety's sake and for the game developers' sake there as well. Which again was also part of what led to the want to make sure to have different types of games as well, like the visual novels, etc., that I mentioned before. Now, a problem then came with the fact that I was trying to create a cohesive story, not only for my games, in line with the game theorist stuff, but also I was insisting on trying to canonize every single Mario associated game that there has ever been. Again, because MatPat didn't include all of them in his theory, just the main ones. Yeah, and that ended up including all of the crossover games as well. All of the ones that crossed over with Legend of Zelda or Metroid, Pac-Man, any of these. Yeah, as I say, that's when trouble started arising, because you now have to decide how are you going to justify the coexistence of these other game universes in there as well. I went through a few different ideas. In some cases, in like the party-based games, like there's some board game type crossover games, I justified them in the same way as I did the Mario Party games, which again I have found a way to explain away the existence of in universe, which is a whole other thing. There's some of those. In terms of Smash Brothers, that's already kind of in its own canon, the result of imagination of a child who subsequently grows up playing with the toys. Although with risk to that, I don't want to lean in too hard on the idea that there is a version where the characters already exist as video games, because then you end up with the same problem as Dream Theory, where in Dream Theory's case you say, oh, if that bit doesn't make sense, that's just because it was all someone's dream. In this case, how can I'm struggling to fit a game into the canon, oh, that was just a video game on the Smash Brothers Earth's version then. That's just too easy, there's no challenge in that. You're trying to argue an actual definitive way that it does make sense that they're all together. So what I ended up having was that the majority of them would be in parallel universes that you then had rifts that could be passed between. Originally, this was going to be in one game in particular, that this is kind of, the idea of this is seeded, being Mario Kart Continental Valley. However, due to details that are explained in that game, and due to details explained there, that has to take place at a certain point in the timeline, more or less. Basically because I want to include all of the new characters in it as well, because it'd be weird to release this game but then have it be set place much earlier in the timeline, therefore none of the new characters could appear in as well. You want to play as the new characters that appeared in the mainline games as well, it has to appear then. But if that was the starting point for all the crossovers happening, all the crossovers happening later, that doesn't work, because there have been Legend of Zelda, Metroid and Kirby references or crossovers in games that definitely take place before that. So I don't want to add another title to those already 26 to try to come up with another game where I can say, actually, this is when the universe has crossed over. So instead, I turned to Kirby. Because, and again, obviously this will be separate to the Mario releases, because I can do whatever it wants. Not only is Kirby separate from that, but also Kirby is kind of cosmic in its lore already. I knew beforehand that there was some weird, like, space-based, like, ancient being stuff in the Kirby lore. But it's a lot more interesting and weird than I originally could have conceived that it was. It was really interesting. So I'd suggest actually looking up the overspanning Kirby franchise lore there. But because it's already got so much space stuff and weird stuff, and like it also has rifts into another dimension at least one point, I had, okay, sure, we'll have a game called Kirby Fractures, which I write as a bonus thing at the end of the document, which set at some unspecified point earlier, comparative to everyone else's timelines. You have obviously fractures between different universes. You wouldn't explicitly show one of the universes to be Mario's specifically, but kind of it can be set up that one of them, as he's passing through them, would have ended up being that, as well as like the Legend of Zelda, etc., etc. And so in that case, now it is after the fact, because of what happened in the event of the games, not all of those rifts closed, although they may be hard to spot, and so from time to time, some character may stumble into someone else's world here or there. I'm not fussed about trying to come up with timelines for any of those other game franchises that then now do exist in this same multiverse, in the same way that I have a timeline in my head of all of the Mario games, because again, they're not Mario, and for all I know, maybe those other games could well exist either chronologically or, for instance, in the case of Legend of Zelda, I mean, that's already got some weird branching timeline stuff in it and whatever, but I'm not fussed about trying to think about those beyond that. So that's now my justification for how they can all exist there. At this point then, having given kind of those overviews of each of the different trains of thoughts and prompts, stimuli that I had come up with these, I should probably just loop back round to what I was saying before about the game theorists' theories about the Mario franchise, because I haven't really mentioned how those tie in at this point. And again, I am trying to fit within these kind of theories as the seeds for the new stories. Well, as part of this, for instance, throughout the games, those that are taking place chronologically of each other at least, there is a slow progression towards Mario getting closer to Daisy, whereas Luigi getting closer to Peach, respectively. Again, never explicitly shown in any of the games, because again, I don't know if Nintendo would really allow that, but there are hints here and there that could allow to set that up, as it's explained. You again also have hints towards the darker side of Peach in terms of her controlling the Toad people, with other like spreads of the fungus in some case when it goes out of control, just not explicitly stated to have come from her. And again, Bowser kind of expositing more about why he is specifically going after her in one case. Again, just saying things in a certain way that would lead one to believe certain things. Also, another big part that isn't necessarily from the theories per se, but I've kind of added my own. My main big contribution here is to do with the origins of humans in this world. Because you do have what appear to be humans in New Donk City, as seen in Mario Odyssey. And previously, in like one of the classic games, in like the manual, Mario species is specified to instead be, I think it's something like Homo Nintendus, or Nintendian, something like that. So they are different to Homo sapiens. Now, in one of MatPat's theories, he suggests that the members of New Donk City are also Homo Nintendus, it's just they underwent certain different environmental changes that led them to be more like what we would think of as humans. Well, I would actually suggest that instead they are different species within the common genus, due to geographical isolation, have evolved differently across the planet. And also, yeah, paying attention to the map that Mario Odyssey showed. While Mario Odyssey didn't show the entire globe, some of the north and south were still slightly obscured, I felt compelled now, because that is now the canon map of that planet, to pay attention to where the different environments were, where the different kingdoms are, and how they can potentially interact with each other, how one would journey from one to the next. That's just a whole other thing. But yeah, so I specifying that they are two different subspecies, or species of each other. And as part of that then, there's an explanation to what happened to the rest of the Homo Nintendus. Why do we only see a small number like Mario, Luigi, etc.? So exploring their series, bringing them back into the present world, bringing them back to the Mushroom Kingdom, etc., from where they had otherwise been lost, trapped. You'll see the details if you read the document. Or at the same time then, also making sure that these don't become human-populated games, that you still have enough and a lot of kind of the bizarre creatures and the magic and the wonder there as well. That is the whole spirit of Mario games. And all that then just leading to a climax, a finale, which is a game that I specify again in its description that, despite the aforementioned attempting to balance tone, would likely be the most consistently dark game. Say a couple of others previously would have a dark moment here or there. This one consistently, as already indicated by the title, Super Mario Desolation, which, while spoiler alert for a game that's probably not going to exist, and either way you could probably imagine it's because it's a kid's game, even though Mario wins out right at the very end, it's more seeing what happens when Bowser wins. As I say, with how less frequent I'm having Bowser appear in the games, I wanted to make sure his actual appearances are made grand enough to justify that fact, to make his reappearances worthwhile. Yes, this is his victory. This is the devastation that is wrought to the land if he is allowed to succeed, and if he goes through with this suddenly new plan that he's discovered for how to conquer all of these different areas. With that though, with the game that, as it stands in the description, that could very much feel like an ending, like the grand finale to Mario. But of course, we don't want the Mario franchise to end. We want to have games coming on after it. Therefore, obviously it would set up that games could come afterwards, but to just go straight into the next one being another like a Mario adventure game, that wouldn't necessarily live up compared to Desolation coming right before it. You need something else in between to kind of cleanse the palate before we go into another adventure game. Therefore, Desolation is actually only the penultimate game in my proposed release schedule. After that, I then also made sure to have a different kind of quirky game, in this case Waluigi's Sports Tycoon, which is first of all a tycoon game, which there hasn't been a Mario to my knowledge thus far. It has Waluigi as the character you're playing through, which also I like because it's a bookend to the whole set of 26, since Waluigi is the villain of the very first one. And in the sports section, because this is also where we kind of justify an order and the existence of all of the sports games where the characters then are kind of helping each other and playing together through Waluigi trying to be the one to organise all of these events and build different like stadiums and areas where these events can take place within, and you can get the kind of type of things that occur in Taiku games that would then be about him trying to make the most money out of it, even if it doesn't mean always doing things quite fairly and so forth. Beyond that, I think just other than talking about some other original characters that I came up with here and there, there's not much else really to discuss beyond actually just talking about the games in specific detail, which again, as I said already, that just leads to this video being excessively long, even more. I don't even know how long this has been so far. You will, because you can see the time bar. But yeah, I'm not looking to go into specific details about the plots of the games and the mechanics and so forth again. As ever, you can check those out by downloading the PDF from my website, link to that in the description below. I do ask that you do. Like, as I say, I spent over a month thinking about this, so if you are a fan of Mario, have a read of it. Just let me know what you think. Would you like to play any of those games? Would any of them be interesting? Do you like the directions I've taken the stories in? Do you not? Either, like, you can leave a comment to this video afterwards, after you've read it, or you could like message me on any of the social medias. Again, you can see linked in the description, or if you know me personally, you can just message me directly, just have a chat. But yeah, I think beyond that, just discussing a few characters like you have Hazel and Quail, who are two plant-based beings from the kingdom of Kadinaland, which has otherwise kind of been a shut-off, recluse region, which is why we haven't come across them before. They would also just be, so far as I'm aware, canonically, the first official gay couple in the games. Not that it's made a big thing of, it's not important to the story, but to the extent that it's shown that Mario is going after Peach, or as in the case in my game is going after Daisy, just acknowledging that they have a thing for each other. You have Mother Jutsuchi, who is a kind of sorceress equivalent there. You've got Suravadi, who's like a knight. You've got President Zia, who, again, just as how with Hazel and Quail's relationship, it's kind of set up and acknowledged, but it's not a main part of the story. I think it would also be good if we could have her being acknowledged as a trans woman in a way that can be conveyed in a kids game. Again, just representation. But also, again, she's a president. She's also kind of a sciencey inventor kind of character, a less off-the-wall version of Professor Egad. And then other than those, because again, those are just the ones I can think off the top of my head, you also have original villains and stuff like that as well. So other than that, probably that's all I have to say in this video. I hope you've piqued your interest enough to get you to have a look over the document itself. So I hope it's interesting, as you might other videos on this channel as well. The next making of a sequel video will be on the Stargate film that I was talking about, that I came up with, but before that obviously we'll be returning back to the regular Non-Chronicles next week. And until I see you then, just be sure to keep on telling stories.